Hello, everyone. I'm Homer Owens with East Kentucky Broadcasting, and we're here to talk with the city manager for the city of Pikeville. Many things are going on with the city, and who better to talk to than the guy who has his finger on the pulse of everything that's happening, Donovan Blackburn.
Homer, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
Things have happened in the last few days, Donovan, that are kind of a surprise, not necessarily a disappointment, in the area of taxation in the city of Pikeville, which affects all of us who live in the city. Can you shed any light on what's happened?
Well, absolutely. Homer, this Monday night, the City Commission adopted a second reading of an ordinance for a restaurant tax. Under Kentucky state law, the city of a fourth class is able to put a restaurant tax in up to 3%. The City Commission chose or elected to put a 1.5% tax in, so effective July the 15th, and a 1.5% restaurant tax will be applied. Now, with that said, the reason July 15th is that under Kentucky law, again, a fourth class city you have to be a fourth or a fifth class city fourth class city to apply for a restaurant tax. This past legislative session, the city of Pikeville went from a third class to a fourth class, but those legislative acts does not take place until July 15. So two reasons. One is that the city also needed to give the restaurants the opportunity to rekey their registers to create the formula in order to get the tax base into the city. So letters will actually go out this week to the restaurants informing them of the tax and what they need to do to comply.
Is this an earmarked tax for a special need in the city?
Absolutely, that's a very good point, and absolutely. This is a regional tax. Let me say that first of all, and it is an earmarked tax in a sense. And what I mean by that is that the East Kentucky Expo Center has come under fire here for the past several years, in the sense of its funding. There's been a lot in the press, as you know, that you've reported on, that the financial burden that the Expo Center has had and the possibility of the facility closing. Last year, the facility ended up in a debt of over $700,000. This year, they're forecasting about $600,000. Next year, they're forecasting about $850,000.
This is not a surprise because the Expo Center and many of the similar facilities around the state were not expected to be self-sustaining.
Well, absolutely. In 1997, under Paul Patton's administration, there was a feasibility study done prior to the Expo Center being built. In that feasibility study, it clearly stated that these venues, especially this venue, would operate at a deficit. The city's comprehensive plan in 2005 echoed that statement, stating that this facility would operate somewhere between $300,000 to $500,000 in the red. And what these facilities are, they're quality of life facilities, Homer. They aren't expected to make money. The tax bases generated from these facilities are expected to go into the facilities to create a better quality of life. Now, the tax that we're talking about, the restaurant tax, and why it's so important for a facility such as this, is I called it a moment ago, a regional tax. And unlike other taxes that have been discussed recently, this is a tax that isn't put solely upon one group or one entity. Now, it's restaurants that create the tax, yes. There's no denying that. And there's about 26 or 27 cities throughout the state of Kentucky that currently has this tax because of meeting that classification of a Class 4 city. And going back again to the earmark and to the regional tax, the reason it's a regional tax is first of all, let me put it in perspective. On a $10 meal, a 1.5 cent tax is 15 cents, which is usually an average meal for one or two people, fast food wise. Now, sit down, it's a little bit obviously more, but when you look at sit down, you're talking about a $20 ticket on a 30-cent tax. Now, the advantage of a 30-cent tax is this is a local tax. This tax is collected here in our community and is spent here in our community. This tax does not go to Washington, D.C. This tax does not go to Frankfort, Kentucky, and we have to fight for those dollars to come back. These taxes are collected by people that travel, work, or in our region or in our community. They're collected by the city. And the intent of this tax is to fill that deficit of the Expo Center, to create a tax base along with, we'll talk about in a moment, I'm sure, the tourism tax, and a lot's been going on with tourism, but understanding that this tax, the City Commission formed recently a City Tourism Commission. That Tourism Commission has adopted a interlocal agreement between the city, because under the law, or 91A 400, this money collected in the restaurant tax comes to the city first from collection, then has to go to the Tourism Commission. That Tourism Commission then has signed an interlocal bringing the tax back to the city for the sole purpose of expenditure for East Kentucky Expo Center and tourism initiatives, which is what the money has to be spent on. Now, again, and I threw in the word other tourism initiatives because under the interlocal agreement, for the city to spend any other money other than the Expo Center, that line item actually doesn't get put in the budget. It has to come before the commission for debate before it would even be considered an expense. So the bulk of it, again, the majority, will all be to fill what the operational cost of the Expo Center is, of which the restaurants, by the way, are the ones that benefit from this facility being open.
Has the Tourism Commission been formed? Has it been staffed?
Yes, it has. It has been, and under the KRS, under the law, and I'll get into that in just a second. But before I do, let me say this, because one other point that you made that I want to make it very, very clear. And I have talked to several communities, several city managers and mayors, the Kentucky League of Cities, on cities that have implemented this tax, this restaurant tax. And what they have told me is, and what research has shown, is that any city that has gone in and implemented this tax, the restaurant revenues have not dropped. They've actually increased, because you're taking that tax and you're reinvesting back into your community for tourism initiatives that are pulling more people to the community. And when more people come to the community, they eat and they shop and they do all the other things that creates an economy. Now, with that said, this is also, the reason I keep saying it's a regional tax is that, and I'll apply it in the principle of the East Kentucky Expo Center and also with the restaurants. The city of Pikeville has 6,900 residents. The county has 60-some thousand, 63,000, I think, under new census. But the service area of Pikeville is 240,000, a little over 240,000. These are people in our region that come here for education. They come here to shop. They come here for the court system, because this is a legal court system with all the different courts. They come here for the regional medical center. They come here for financial reasons. And when I go to Lexington to see my doctor, I shop, I eat, I get gas. It creates an economy. So that tax is being paid by the 240,000 people that visit and come through our city community to eat, not just the 6,900 in the city of Pikeville.
So you're saying that burden is shared.
That's exactly right.
And it becomes a positive because of the population base.
That's why it's only 1.5 cents, because the local population isn't having to absorb that total tax. It's being absorbed by all those people that can visit our community, but yet our local community are the ones that gets to take advantage of it for economic prosperity.
How many restaurant outlets are there in the city of Pikeville, Donald?
To be honest with you, I don't know the exact number. Last count, it was close to 100. Because there is a lot of facilities, and it was, I think, their sales. And again, Homer, I'm having to draw back, is close to $500 million in sales, or 480 million, something like that, in total sales.
So the projected income, if we can call taxes income to the city, $650,000. That is not excessive.
It's not. It's not. I mean, you're talking, again, I think, and let me clarify this too, is because under the 650, that also includes alcohol sales, and we don't collect on alcohol sales. It has its own separate tax. So it's food and beverage. So again, forecasting where we believe that what the tax will generate on 1.5 cent, we're probably looking somewhere around 600 to 650,000.
Does that close the gap for the Expo Center?
Big time. Again, understanding that next year's forecast is $850,000, and this isn't the city forecasting it. This is SMG forecasting based upon their trend. Now, the $650,000, which you make a very good point, isn't. And the question is, because we're marrying two different tax bases together. One we talked about is the new restaurant tax. Another tax is the local bed tax that we're asking for the new commission to also, because that tax has already been in place. That tax has been in place for many, many years. And it's a point of discussion right now with the joint.
And we're going to talk about it in just a moment.
And that tax, if the city generates that tax, it generates another $150,000 that would come back to the city from the bed tax. So we're looking about generating close to $800,000 in tax. The problem is the $685,000 we're talking about is no capital improvements to the facility. That's sole operational cost. The Question is you've got a 7-year-old building over there now, what happens when the lights start breaking down? What happens when the AC goes out? What happens when the seats start breaking? Right now they've got problems over there with concrete. They've got problems with the telescopic seats. They've got problems with the water system.
These are these all deficiencies that you were aware of before the
No.
negotiation?
No, these are deficiencies that we noticed after we had signed the contract with SMG. Now the question is well, why didn't you look at this facility beforehand and see these deficiencies? But the end result is still the same. If we don't take this plan of action, then the facility closes, regardless if there's deficiencies or not. We have to look at what the operating cost of the facility is. Then we have to look at what the capital cost of the facility is and come with a budget and create sustainability. The problem is there's no sustainability. Back under Patton's administration, there was money put into the budget, $250,000 I think a year, through coal severance to help fund this facility. Unfortunately, under Fletcher's administration, under some of the budget roles, that money was stripped out and has not been put back in. The county, Judge Rutherford, working with the legislators, with Ray Jones and Leslie and W. Keith, they were able to put money back into the coal severance funds of $200,000. So there is $200,000 last year and this year. Problem was that the facility had a $600,000 debt that hadn't been paid, and looking at another $600,000 debt this year. So there wasn't enough money, and there was no revenue stream. You had the Governor Brashear that stepped out on YMT and said, and we respect and appreciate his view, and said this facility cannot close, but the state has no money to keep it open. And we were looking for other means and other offers. So when we went, we spoke to David Williams, and we spoke to Greg Stumbo, and we laid out what our plan was. They were 100% in favor of this because this is a state facility. It's a regional facility, and people cannot lose focus of that. This is a regional facility. This is not a City of Pikeville facility. Now that we're managing it, it supports the region. It supports tourism. It creates jobs. It creates over $10 million worth of economic funding into this community. And these are people that travel. Understand too that only in the recent events that this facility has had, only 10% of the events attended over there are from people from Pikeville, from 41501 or 41502 zip code. All the other, the 90% of it comes from people outside of Pikeville. Part of it's Pike County, a lot of Floyd County, Paintsville, Prestonsburg. 10% of the people that attend the facility come from outside the state. So there's a benefit to the state, there's a benefit to the county, there's a benefit to the region. So it is a regional facility and should be supported as such. The problem is, we had a meeting this past Monday, and the question was asked, why can't the City of Pikeville solely support this? Well, first of all, we don't have the financial means to support it by the general fund. Last year was the first year, like the county, we had to eat into some of our reserve. The city is doing well. We have a lot of projects. There's a lot of building going on, and I think our outlook is good. But it's a regional facility. The region has to support the facility.
Having said all that, have you written off the state for any kind of help after all this is?
Absolutely not.
An election year.
Absolutely
I don't
not.
need to remind you of that.
No, we understand that, and we have spoken to our legislators. We've got, look, Homer, you know yourself, we've got great legislators. Leslie Combs, Ray Jones, W. Keith, always fight and stand up for this community. I mean, they stand up and they fight hard. Anytime that I've gone down and I've shown them a plane, they've been the first one to the forefront saying we're going to work. They have committed that they will continue to support this facility through the legislation as long as this facility is here. So we're drawing upon other opportunities for them. There is, there's a new hotel getting ready to be built, and it's not been really released publicly, but it should start this August. This will bring another 120 to 130 rooms to the community. So we're going to have 250 rooms for this community. The problem before is that we cannot really go after convention business because we don't have the hotels to support it. But we've got people like Ray Jones and Leslie and W. Keith that understand that argument. So we've gone in and we've said, look, we need legislative support because we need to get these conferences to our community because they benefit the hotels, they benefit the restaurants, they benefit the expo center, but more importantly, they benefit the region. Because that's tax base that's coming to us instead of in years past where we've had to go to them. We talked about the restaurant tax. We support our outlying communities. We're working with them right now. And we can talk about that a little bit later when we get to the tourism piece. But when I go to Prestonsburg and I go to Paintsville, I'm paying a restaurant tax. They're benefiting from my dollars when I go to Jenny Wiley. We want them, when they come here, to do the same, to leave those dollars here with our community so that our community can benefit from them. The East Kentucky Expo Center, the MAC, Stonecrest, all these different tourism attractions in our community all play off and feed off of one another. But quality of life is an important thing. I'm sure, growing up in this community in Pikeville, when I was a child, many years ago, looking for activities to do, you either went bowling or you went to Station Alpha and played video games. For some of those that was around there in that era. But now our youth has got more and more to choose from. Through brain drain and people moving outside the region, we're creating a true economy with the regional facilities. The college just became a university. The medical center is doing a $100 million improvement. I just spoke to Walter May this past week, and he said they're bringing 12 to 13 new doctors in just this year alone. Well, recruiting doctors into this area, they don't want to come to just what they've seen in the lights as Eastern Kentucky. They want a quality of life, and we've been able to provide that. The mainstream media outside of Eastern Kentucky has sold us short too long, too often. Now which we've always had, we've got a prideful people here that work hard. Our people deserve the same quality of life as people in Lexington, people in Huntington, people in Charleston, all the other outside and surrounding areas. And through what's going on right now in Pike County, that's happening. And the Expo Center is a big part of that. It's a big part of that.
Has the Expo Center become a 600-pound gorilla in your living room? Is there anything else going on in the community that we can talk about? You mentioned controversial bed tax. You want to touch on that?
Well, yes, we will. Let me say this first. You've asked a question about a gorilla, and the answer is it could be if we don't take the action that we're taking now. You've got a 130,000 square foot facility in the heart of Pikeville, which is the county seat. I know, I've spoke with Judge Rutherford. He's a good friend of mine. He works, we work hand in hand. One of the first things that I did when I went and spoke to him and said, Judge, I understand with all these significant events that's going on in our community for flooding and ice storms and et cetera, when you have power outages, you need to put people somewhere. You've used this facility as a distribution point. We still need to do that. We need to work together to make sure that Pike Countyans in this region is taken care of. So this facility has a pivotal point, not just for entertainment, but it has a pivotal point for, we're working right now on a mitigation grant trying to get a generator there in case the power does go out. But the power company has done a good job in bringing two-phase power into the city to where if one system goes out, they've got a backup to where it keeps the other one out. And that's why very seldom do we lose power even in these significant events. But we have a facility here again that is a pivotal point that could become a gorilla, but more importantly, wouldn't be able to serve the taxpayers. I spoke with Paul Patton not too long ago, and he put this into perspective for me. When he was governor, why he looked at bringing this facility into our community. And it was that he thought it was the right thing to do. There were studies saying it was the right thing to do, and he worked hard to get it here because of the quality of life. And he said, Donovan, my work was through, and I knew that I did the right thing the first time when I went to the facility and I watched a child's face when they were able to watch Mickey Mouse on Ice for the first time. Because in our area, we do have impoverished people, but these acts are affordable. The school systems works with the Expo Center. And this is a venue that this child would have never been able to have seen, would have never been able to participate in, wouldn't have those memories for the rest of his life if it hadn't been for that facility. And the other part of this is under Patton's administration, when they built this, the legislators looked and they put coal severance in. It's funny when you talk about what coal severance is actually for, Homer, and it's to build an economy once the coal is gone. But you've created a venue using partial coal severance funds that I attended the first concert in the facility. And it's a very memorable concert for me. I can't remember who it was right now, but
perhaps Leonard Skinner.
It may have been. I was sitting on the side of the stage, and I had a lady and her child behind me, and the child was just in awe, just amazed at the concert. First time they've ever been to a concert, they were in awe. And during intermission, we got to talking, my wife and I, to the mother and asked what they thought about the venue and introduced myself. And she said, well, the only sad part is that her husband couldn't be here to also enjoy the concert. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Why not? And she said, well, he's working. And I said, well, what's he do for a living? He's a coal miner. So the sweat of his brow and his hard work upon his back is what helped bring that facility to this community that allowed his child to enjoy something for the first time. That's quality of life. It's the hard work of that coal miner and this community that's allowed this venue to be here. And we've got to make sure that it stays. The commission, there's no other plan out there. Everybody that I've talked to in business, I've talked to restaurant owners that support this tax and understand this tax. There's a couple that didn't support this tax because they didn't understand it. They thought it was a tax upon their business. It's a pass-through tax. Restaurants don't pay the tax. It's the patron that pays the tax, and it's only 15 cents. I tip far more than 15 cents when I go to a sit-down restaurant if I get good service. if I knew that extra 15 cents or 30 cents or dollar was going to keep the doors open so that my kid and my grandkids can enjoy this quality of life, it's an important issue and we're willing to do that.
It's not threatening for us to hear pass through, but it is threatening to hear that three-letter word that ends in X, tax. That's what scares us.
It does. Tax does scare people. And I realize, again, I've got a commission that is not for taxes. And when I first came on board, we looked at every avenue where we could do away with government spending and reinvest those dollars into things like tourism initiatives, which we're getting ready to get into here, I know, here in a minute. But taxes are never good. But I believe if there is a tax that is good, it's a local tax, because that local tax is reinvested back into the community. In other words, I'm giving the county or the city, the county money on a local tax, but I'm able to enjoy the benefits of that tax personally. For example, the city park, that was generated off of occupational tax. We did a $2 million investment in the park. 7 years ago, there were 7 events scheduled in the city park. Last year, there was over 400 events scheduled in the city park. The Expo Center is the same. People, there's been a stigma out there that the Expo Center is being underutilized, and I don't disagree that it needs to be utilized more, and I know that was a question you asked me a second ago. And there is a lot of things going on. One of the major components is understand as a promoter is uncertainty. If I go to the Expo Center and I schedule an act because they don't schedule an act that's going to take place next week, they schedule an act that's going to be 3 months down the road. Well, if I schedule that act and I put my efforts into there and I don't go somewhere else, but you've got a facility that's threatening to closing, I don't want to do business with you because I want to go to somewhere where I know I'm going to get my return back. So that's been the problem in the past, is so much uncertainty.
First, you would not be even considered unless there was a financial stability there.
And that's the necessity, and the key word is financial stability, which is sustainability. So it cannot be a plan, Homer, of just having funding that's going to pay this year's bills. You have to have funding that's going to pay the next 10-year bills, a plan in place to keep the doors open so that these acts get familiar with you, know who you are, because and I've learned a lot about this business that probably you know a whole lot about because of the business you're in. But I've learned a lot about this business now since the time.
It's not a sure thing.
It's definitely not a sure thing, and it's people have come up to me on the streets and understand SMG still manages this facility. We're just the overseers. And if you want an act, and I've had so many people in my ears say, how about get this act, how about get this act? It's not as simple as that, as you know this. It's not, you don't call up the artist and say, come here. You go through a promoter. A promoter promotes the act, and they have to make sure that it makes money before they're able to recommend. And then each act has a level of different expectations. So it's a very difficult business to be in, but sustainability and assurance is the key component to get these big promoters to look at your venues.
You and I were recently at a meeting where someone suggested that we get Bruce Springsteen. And someone said, who wants to underwrite $200,000?
That's exactly right.
We'll bring him right in.
Well, that's exactly right. If you look at the feasibility study, and that's what people, community and even myself, and we're all guilty, we have short memories. You've got to go back to what the catalyst was that brought this facility here, and that was the feasibility study. The feasibility study, if you read through it, it's about a 150-page document. It says that this venue will bring in local type acts, and I say local, people that have a heritage here. You have to look at your market. You have to understand that maybe a Springsteen, though, under my era, the boss was it. And, yeah, I'm for Bob Seger and Springsteen. I mean, this is my kind of music. But the general public in this market may not go and fill 7,000 seats with who. It
would cause you restless nights if you knew you were underwriting that kind of
That's
seat.
the problem. That's the problem. So you have to look at acts that will sell this out, can tailor to the community. But with that said, and I figure you were going to go down this road, so I have a paper in front of me that I'd like to educate some folks on. Last year was probably a soft year for the facility, and because of the economic downturn and the unsurety of the facility. The Expo Center had to cut back on staff. They couldn't promote as many concerts as they wanted. There was unsurety. It was nobody's fault. It was the economic times. There was no funding mechanism in place. So the Expo Board, under the leadership of Charles Baird, did a wonderful job with what they could do. The problem was when Charles came to me and said, Donovan, we got a real problem. The facility is going to close. What can we do? And he suggested that the city look at taking over. Well, when I started talking to the commission, this plan is what we looked at putting in place. But in 2009, 2010, there was 140 events in the Expo Center. 140. Now, this could be everything from a meeting to a ball game so you've got 140 events that created over 107,000 people that came through the doors. That's only recordable events. There's a lot of smaller meetings that they don't record as an event. That was in the worst year. In the best year, there was 140 performance days, 76 events, and 170,000 people that came through the facility. Last year, the year before last year, you had 194 performance days, 156 events, and generated 140,000 people through the facility.
Do you have any figures about projections before you took over operation where it would be less painful for you to participate?
Well,
it's never going to be self-sustaining.
It will. I don't believe it. Well, it will not be. I mean, and if people have that expectation, then I'm sorry, we're not going to meet that expectation. I'm putting everything back into the city's comprehensive plan and the feasibility study. Before the facility was built, it was understood that it would lose money. Now, to your question, and I've been asked this a lot. How is it doing now that the city's taken over? Well, it's doing well. And when I say well, the first part of it is sustainability. If you look at the building, it's already becoming cleaner because now they've got revenue that they can have staff to go in and start cleaning it up. Steve St. John now has staff that we've been able to hire back to where he can focus on acts. I can't release because of the confidentiality, and you understand this business as well. There's things you can't announce yet because you jeopardize the deal that's being put together. But in speaking with Steve, they already have one act a month, I think, from at least through September through the end of the year, but probably hopefully through August. There's another act we're talking to right now. There is several conferences that, knowing the hotel is coming over, that's now talking to us. There is a lot of local participation that had pulled away from the facility, that had either annual scheduled meetings there that had gone away. They're now coming back to the table. Because my argument is through sustainability, our intent is also make the pricing affordable. The problem has been is that the Expo Center had to make payroll. They had to make funding. So the rates, though they are comparable to the rates of the rest of these type of venues, we felt like in a rural community they're still a little bit too high for the local folks to be able to utilize this facility. I want to make it up in quantity. And obviously meaning is that you can do one venue and make and say, okay, it's $40,000 for this event, or you can do 10 venues and charge them $10,000 for the event. You still have to pay for the lights, you still have to pay for the electrical costs, but you also have to pay for the help, the security, all the other things that goes along with that. If you do more frequent events, then you've created dollars for the facility. The other part of this is advertising. You know, this facility relies heavily upon two items, and that's advertising and food sales. So if you create more events, you're generating more food sales. If you create more events, then you've got more people that's willing to advertise with you, because nobody wants to go into a facility where you've only got 10,000 people a day going through it, or a year. But if you get 200,000 people a year going through it, they're more apt to give you dollars to advertise, which helps offset the cost that we have to charge. If you look at the venue and look around the venue right now, there's a lot of blank signs up there. We need to get public support. And I have met personally with a lot of business leaders and have explained to them this position. I don't run into one business leader that says this facility should close and we need to do away with it. They understand the quality of life. They understand what this facility does for them. Matter of fact, just before coming over, I spoke to a gentleman that owns several restaurants in the area, that is national restaurant chains, and he understands the importance of the Expo Center and what it does for his business. He understands the necessity and is not opposed to the restaurant tax. He has several businesses in other cities that has a restaurant tax and will tell you that it has benefited his businesses. So these aren't numbers that we're just projecting. These are facts and figures that are in print.
Well, the Expo Center, for the purposes of what we're doing today, has become the 600-pound gorilla. Can we change off that just for a moment? We're talking with Donovan Blackburn, City Manager of the City of Pikeville. I have a good memory, and we started somewhere around controversial bid tax.
Yes, we did. And when I say controversial, I mean, obviously, let me make this completely clear, Homer. I respect immensely the job and so does the City Commission for that fact, that the job that the Joint Tourism Commission has done for the region over the years. We have a difference of opinion from a business perspective what's in the best interest for the community. Not saying that their heart isn't in it and that they don't have good ideals, they do. We just have a difference of opinion. The way that I have put it is that understand that the elected officials, the city commission, and the mayor and the city commission, they see things from 35,000 feet. And because they're managing everything from tourism to roads to public safety to parks, and I could go on and on and on. The tourism commission sees it from 5,000 feet, from tourism and what they're trying to generate. That's not a good or bad thing. That's not a slam. That is to say that the intent of what the city's looking at is looking at things more vast, and we're trying to explain that to them, and there's a difference of opinion in this. The city has recently taken some steps that, candidly speaking, that I have not had one person in the community that hasn't came to me and said you're doing the right thing and we fully support you, other than the Tourism Commission. You know, talking back about the your position or your question is that what the City Commission is doing with the Tourism Commission. You've got Judy Patton that chairs the commission. Judy is a dear friend of mine. She and I, along with another group, went to China this past year. I love her dearly, respect her more than anybody will ever imagine, and she's just a wonderful lady. But there's other people on this commission there that are good friends of mine. Reed Potter is a great friend of mine, and I'll miss some of them as I go around the horn. But I know every one of them on that tourism commission. I know where their heart is, and these are hardworking people. They volunteer their time. They don't get any pay for this. But I also understand that a city commissioner only makes $3,000 a year. They meet twice a month. You've got a commissioner that they're so, they get those 10 phone calls a week talking about this or that. They're doing this for the love of the community, not for the money. They're making the decisions and they take the blunt of it. They make hard decisions on all the facts. Tourism Commission's trying to do the same thing. We just think that for the best return on the investment, we have to protect what the best interest is, and that's the East Kentucky Expo Center. Now, with that said, what the city has done, as you started your question, is that I drafted a letter on behalf of the City Commission to the Tourism Commission. What ended up happening is in knowing the trail of what it took to get the Expo Center to where it is today, it has taken about 8 months to do. First, we had to go and meet. I went and met with the legislators. I met with Greg Stumbo, who fully supported the plan. I met with, and I won't say the bed tax part, I'm just talking about the city taking over. I met with David Williams. I've met with our local representatives. Then from there, I had to have conversations with the State Treasury Department because of making sure that legally the city could sign a lease with the board, of which they've endorsed. I had to meet with the Expo board. We had to draft a lease agreement. The problem with the lease agreement is that they had a contract with SMG, the operating company, that contract cannot be assigned. So then after we get all that done, and then I had to go and work with SMG to formulate a contract. And we did it. We have a great contract. Both sides did some concessions, and we've got some things that will benefit the taxpayers of the community that's paying for this tax. So with all that said, once all this was done, this took place, the final signature to finalize this whole deal took place on a Monday. I met with the Tourism Commission on a Wednesday. We did a press release Wednesday evening. We asked the Tourism Commission to take action the following week. Part of the aggravation of the Tourism Commission is that you didn't give us enough time to digest this. But here's the problem. The problem is under the agreement that we had with SMG, they had a debt of about $320,000 that was owed to them. They hadn't been paid for about a year and a half. And their position is that as the largest entertainment group in the country, that we need to be made whole. We're willing to, and they actually granted back $100,000. They did some things in concessions. They had a 5-year contract. They agreed to amend it down to a 1-year contract with 4 1-year options.
This was all part of the original negotiation.
Right. This is what the original, to get us to this point. The reason for all this explanation is to say this wasn't a knee-jerk decision. This has been months and months of discussion and planning. However, the tourism piece of it came in later. As you said earlier, why didn't you know? Were you aware of the problems in the Expo Center, the leaks and all these things? The answer is no. We realized there was a goal. The goal was to keep the doors open. So we worked diligently with our state and many, many hours. I can't tell you how many hours I put into drafting contracts and to meeting with attorneys. So after we got through all this, and at the end of the day, we said, look, looking at the reports that we had been told, this facility was forecast to lose between $300,000 and $400,000. But now that we were in negotiation with SMG, we got a copy of their books. We knew what the facility was actually losing. And we realized it was not a $400,000, $300,000, it was an $800,000 debt. So we had to come up with a strategy that created a tax base that would pay for that $800,000. So we went and met, in the last hour we talked about the hotel bed tax, and we talked about the restaurant tax, because back in January the commission was opposed to a restaurant tax. But understanding the economic impact that this facility has, understanding that Pikeville College is now housed there and just spent $100,000 for a new locker room. The girls' team is getting ready to move over to the facility. They just won a national championship. Understanding that the Drillers is now part of the community. Understanding all the things that I've talked about before. The intent was that we'd come up with a funding mechanism. So we met with the Tourism Commission on Wednesday. We did a press, so you sign the agreement on a Monday, you meet with them on a Wednesday, and you say, okay, part of the contract is we've got to pay the back debt of $600,000. Well, we got the funding from the county of $200,000 in coal severance. The city had $100,000. So we went in and paid back the back debt. Well, now we're broke. We have no money to fund this facility. Today we have no money other than what the facility is generating. So now it's generating that $600,000 debt that I'm talking about. So the commission had to act quickly in order to create a tax base, which was a bed tax and a restaurant tax, and now create funding to keep the doors open today. Because after today, there is no more funding until this restaurant tax kicks in. There is no more funding until we generate the bed tax. That was the urgency. So in meeting with the Tourism Commission, we explained to them the urgency. Now, what the city isn't asking for anything. I met with Judge Rutherford, explained to him the position. The city isn't taking money. There's a perception that the city's taking money away from the county as well. You're withdrawing from the county joint tourism, you're taking its money, and the answer is absolutely not. We understand. We work well with the county. We promote tourism. We promote the ideal, Homer, and that's further from the truth. We took this in consideration. What the city came to, and put it into this perspective, bed tax, you've got a new hotel that's getting ready to be built. Without the expo staying open, I've spoke to the owner of the hotel, and he says, I can't build the hotel if the expo center closes because the funding doesn't work. I've got to have the expo stay open. So we looked at what is the number one benefit in the sense of tax base, and that is the restaurant tax and the hotel tax from the East Kentucky Expo Center. So we went and drafted a letter to the Tourism Joint Commission and said, here's what we like. The City Commission has had this tax in place for some time. We want this tax to stay in place. We've been collecting this tax. The only thing we're asking for is to take the hotel tax that's generated just from the businesses in the city of Pikeville. You generate and rent that tax back to the city to help keep the doors open, because you cannot argue with this. The $160,000, there's no other venue, there's nothing else that tourism does that generates those kind of numbers. So it will benefit. If this facility closes, you lose 160,000 people in our community that frequents the Expo Center, and with the sustainability, those numbers will continue to climb. So
it may just be me, Donald. Let me interrupt you
no, you're
for
fine.
a second. Has the problem been resolved? Let's get to the bottom line of that deal.
No, it has not been. Yes, it has, and no, it's not. And I know that's a political answer, I guess. But that's where I'll go to, Homer. In speaking with the Tourism Commission, what we've offered to them is said, this is what we want you to do, and if not, then we're going to have to take other action. And that's where it has been resolved. So it hasn't been resolved with the joint tourism. But when we came back to them and said, look, this tax is being generated by these hotels. The Expo Center staying open benefits the hotels. So what we will do is the city currently owns the train that they operate in. They pay their expenses. So we said, look, you move out of the train, you move into the Expo Center. You got more traffic in the Expo Center than you'll ever have in the train. 160,000 people. You can stand there and hand out pamphlets all day. You got markets from outside the state that's coming in. You can market very well into there. The Expo Center is not a duplication in services. The water is already on, the heat's on, the air's on, the phone system's there. You have no operating cost. We will pay for your secretary because we have to have somebody over there also sitting at the desk. So the city will agree to pay for Miss Golf. So we take that burden away from you. They generate about $50,000 a year from county hotels. So you keep that $50,000 and you pay for your director over there, so you can keep your director in place. Over the years, instead of spending money on projects, they spend money on brochures, but they've got $200,000 in CDs right now. And our point is that you keep your CD money. We pay for your operational cost. We pay for your secretary, but then we are able to take that $140,000 that's a regional tax and apply it to keeping the doors open. Their argument is that they generate another $60,000 that comes from in-kind services from, or matching funds from the state of Kentucky that they use for marketing. That's what they go to West Virginia, Tennessee, other markets they spend this money on to advertise events that's happening in our community in Pike County and Pikeville. And they have to have money, they have to spend the money first in order to get the money back. It's a 90% rebate. So our argument is now, so there's been concessions along the way in saying, take $60,000 out of your CD, spend it, and then when you send those bills back to Frankfort, they're going to write you 90% of that back. So you're going to get your money back. You're not really spending it, you're getting it back. The 10% that you lose would be $6,000. The city would kick that back in, so you've not lost that money.
Are they saying that they need some time to dissolve all those thoughts, resolve them in their own mind, rather? Aren't you, in essence, asking them to give up their control of that sector, the tourism sector, by
Absolutely
taking away funding or taking away
Absolutely
their CDs?
Not. Absolutely not. And again, because A, their CD stays in place, A, their county money stays in place, A, they still operate as an entity. They still have money to do pamphlets, they still get the $60,000 to do everything that they're doing basically now. What they may have to give up, in their opinion, is one position. They've just recently hired somebody over there that does some marketing for them. They may have to do away with one position. The counter argument is, Homer, that if the facility closes, then the hotels will lose business. If the hotels lose business, then they reduce their amount of bed tax they're getting anyway. If the Expo Center goes out of business, they're hurting the economy. I assure you, they're not generating $10 million to the local economy by passing out pamphlets. Now, I'm not saying that pamphlets don't have a good, benefit to our community, and it's no disrespect. One of the things that Mr. Potter and I debated is that they just did a pamphlet on the bushwhack up in Elkhorn City, which is I was up there Saturday. I spoke to one of the gentlemen that was up there, and they had 1,100 people. Well, their argument is that we did pamphlets, and we created 4 times the amount of people this year than we did last year, which was 1,100. And in front of me, I have the tourism's budget, and as I can show you, they spent in 2009, because they're a year behind. They're in 2009, 2010. They spent $60,000 in advertising. What they spent on events, which was a half of the McCoy during this year, was $2,000. The rest of their funding, $100,000, was spent on marketing and personnel. They're still keeping their marketing and personnel. We're not asking them to do away with that.
Is there a timeline on decision and resolution?
Well, that's where we were going with this. Let me finish my comment before I answer that question on the bushwhacking. They generated 4 times the amount with a pamphlet, which was 1,100 people on Saturday. The city of Pikeville does do tourism. We do tourism every day. Muscle on Main generates about 5,000 to 6,000 people a month, and we do it monthly 6 or 7 months of the year. We just spent $1 million for a new soccer complex that the Pikeville College can do regional tournaments that pull in. We spent $680,000 on a football complex that pulls in regional tournaments. We spent $700,000 on a bike trail and cross-country trail. We just spent over $200,000 on new boat ramps, $400,000 on the River Trails program. We're working on many, many, many more tourism initiatives, but we have to have the Expo Center to keep this facility open, so the Pikeville's not going away from tourism. What Pikeville's saying is let's work together. We'll continue to use our resources. You use your advertising dollars, but let's pull together. But we have to have funding to close the Expo Center. If the Expo Center closes, then where are you at? You lose your bed tax, you lose the support, you lose that quality of life. Who's hurt is Pikeville College. Who's hurt is the doctor's quality of life, the hospital's ability to recruit. Who's hurt is that child over in Phelps that can't come over and see Mickey Mouse on Ice. That's who's hurt. Now, the question you asked on timelines. The Commission's position is that we asked them to consider the position. They have denied. Basically, their response is that they have taken up this. They were asked basically to ultimately the same thing with the tourism board. With the Expo board instead of the city of Pikeville years ago, or last year rather. They were asked 2 times and they denied it twice. They said we've already considered this as an option and we've denied it already 2 times. We want to digest it. The city's position is, as well as you're digesting it, we're going to go ahead and move forward. We can undo anything that we've done, but we understand the Expo is out of funding. We have to move forward. We're not taking the county's bed tax. We're not taking the county's the CDs, But the county also loses if the expo center closes. The county also loses if hotels close. The county loses if the college can't. So it's a regional issue. So we have implemented, to your question, we have implemented a city tourism commission. They have met, they have formed bylaws. The commission, they have adopted bylaws. They've adopted an interlocal agreement. The commission has implemented the restaurant tax. So all the components are in place. This past Monday, we met with the tourism commission as well to let them give their argument to the city commission, and the city commission give our argument. Now, on our argument, Homer, I put together about a 40-page slideshow, and there's been 6 or 7 studies that have been done in the city and the county over the past couple of years, okay? Every study done stated that the East Kentucky Expo Center is the main pivotal piece for tourism. Every study. Their own commission did a study as well. Their study, and I'm going to give it to Pike TV officials, and they can flash it up on the screen here as well. But their own study says that the Chamber of Commerce, Pikeville Fiscal Court, City of Pikeville, and Pikeville Tourism will have to pool their funding together in order to help fund the facility because it's going to have a deficit. So their own study says that they need to spend the money for the facility.
Is the bed tax a make or break decision?
It absolutely is. Absolutely will be. It is. Now, and that's a good point, because the other part of the interlocal agreement that we presented to Tourism Commission, in the very last line of that says that in a couple of years, the city can, after the Expo Center is stable, after it has, if we elect, in other words, if we determine, let's say that there's $800,000 or $900,000 in revenue, because there's 6 or 7 new restaurants coming to town, getting ready to open this coming year. If revenues continue to increase and we found ourselves in a surplus position after capitals and operational expense, then we'll sit back down with them and revisit that money coming back to them. We realize that today there's a need today, but there was unknowns when we started back 8 months ago. There will be unknowns going into the future. But
is the restaurant tax and bed tax tied together? Is that one decision?
It is part of the funding scenario as far as the city commission, because it's a regional tax. Again, why is it a regional tax? Because the bed tax is paid by people that visit and come through the area. It's not paid by the citizens of Pikeville. People that stay in the hotels, people that travel here pay. The necessity to generate that tax base up to that $800,000 or $900,000 range that we're talking about, not only to support the Expo Center, but also support the capital needs for the facility, Homer. That's where this comes into play. Now, the question is, and you haven't asked me this, but I'll throw it out there. Well, the bed tax is at its maximum. It's at 3%. And 1%, the bed tax basically says that a city can implement up to 3% for a bed tax. And if you have an expo convention center, you can put on another 1%. Okay? The 3% is to fund the Tourism Commission, which under their own, under the KRS, because it's a very, very important point, when the city first adopted the resolution to form the Joint Tourism Commission back in the 1980s, if you look at the joint resolution, it says that it's to promote tourism and convention business. Okay, that was the intent of the original law. If you look at the KRS under 91A, 360, and 390, first of all, it gives the Tourism Commission the right to enter into contracts to support tourism and convention business. So they have the right to do this contract. It also gives them the right, there is a specific clause, I think it's under 91A 360 or 390 paragraph 4, that says that the Tourism Commission, under the bed tax, it would be under 390, under the bed tax, can allot a portion of the bed tax, a portion being 1% or 99%, a portion of their bed tax for the operational cost of a convention center or a convention business. So the KRS specifically says that they have the authority to do this under the KRS. The city's plan in the very beginning was to promote tourism business. So what the city has done is we said, understand the bigger picture. And when I spoke to somebody on the Tourism Commission right now that has a different view of the majority that says, I see the big picture, we have to protect the mechanism that these 7 studies says it's a business decision. You know, you've got a study that says the Expo Center's at the top of every study, from the Ad District, the Area Development District did a study, mentioned the Expo Center. The Tourism Study did a study, the City Comprehensive Plan says the Expo Center has to be done. In 2003, the Cabinet for Economic Development did a study that said what can go wrong in Pike County. There was about 5 key items that said what can go wrong in Pike County if certain things don't happen. One of them is this expo center ends up folding or goes empty. Would be a major downslaught to this community. So everything that we're talking about, Homer, isn't based upon speculation. It's based upon fact. The Tourism Commission, they started by saying these are great people that have good ideals and who I dearly love. We have a difference of opinion on what their forecasting is they have big plans into the future. They've asked us, why don't you go after coal severance? The problem is coal severance won't be available for another year and a half. January is when they set coal severance. Before you get the money, it's a year and a half from now. Within a year and a half, we'll have built up $1 million deficit on the facility. There's other initiatives that they want to pursue. One of them is convention business. Well, convention business won't happen until you get your second hotel business, but we're working on that also. So our argument is let's combine resources. You're not losing your identity. You're still able to go after tourism. You're given a better venue, a newer venue that has more traffic in it. We're paying for your personnel to stay in place. But I believe if you ask, I'd be very, very surprised, because the ones I've talked to wholly agree with you. I believe if you ask a taxpayer on the street and say, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a pamphlet that promotes the region, or would you rather have a venue that you can go to and enjoy an act and enjoy Mickey Mouse on Ice, enjoy a concert, make it more affordable for the hospital to have a New Year's event? Which one would you prefer? I believe that in this bed tax would be utilized for the funding mechanism. I'd be very, very strongly surprised if they don't side with the venue. Now, I'm not saying there's not a need for the pamphlets. There is, but there's a mechanism in place that keeps that $60,000 with the Tourism Commission to allow them to still do these things that they're doing, is my point.
Let me distill this down and take the Tourism Commission's position, and you correct me if I'm wrong. Sure. You're suggesting that they turn over to the city to incorporate into the operation of the Expo Center their entire funding revenue, which comes from the bed tax.
Only in the city, but we're not. They generate still money from the state as in-kind match. They would keep that money. They generate bed tax from the county, about $50,000 a year, which they're in court over right now. Not with the county, but with one of the hotels. They keep that funding. And they're getting funding back. We're agreeing to give them operational costs that they're paying now. That's what you have to understand. We're taking $140,000, but we're paying their light bill, their phone bill, all their electrical costs, things that they're paying now. We're paying one of their personnel positions. We're giving them the $6,000 that they lose in the in-kind services. So they're getting a lot of that back now. They're still able to stay in business, keep their identity. They're not losing. If the Expo Center goes under, they will lose. The problem is the City Commission cannot fund the facility if this thing ends up in a legal battle.
Did you say the bed and restaurant tax is tied together?
It's under the KRS. Now, that's a good point, too. I'm glad you said that. Let me clarify this. Is under 91A 400. 91A, KRS 91A 360 gives the City Commission the right to implement a bed tax, as I said, up to 3 or 4%. Now, let me make this straight too. It's up to 3%, and it's a very good point to make. It's the City Commission, by the passage. Tourism is an arm of the city. It is formed by the Commission. They're the ones that sets how much bed tax that the Tourism Commission gets. It says up to 3%. Realistically, the City Commission can put the bed tax at 0.1%, and that's what would be funded to the Tourism Commission. The restaurant tax is separate. It's a separate tax, but it's under that same chapter. It says that in conjunction with a bed tax, a city of a fourth class can also implement a restaurant tax of up to 3%. Now, the City Commission has elected to only put 1.5% in. Now, the reason, and I started a minute ago saying that you haven't asked me that question, and it's why don't you just put the full 3% in? Because it's the wrong thing to do. The Commission's trying to say there's already a tax base out there. We're not trying to put an unburdened tax on this facility, but understand, Homer, that the mayor, if you read the local newspaper today, and today being Wednesday when we're taping this, that in that local newspaper, the mayor is quoted saying that there's other cities and communities, specifically Coal Run, that benefits from this facility. When we have a facility, they've got a hotel, they've got restaurants, they're busy as well. It was a regional facility built but people, Elkhorn benefits from it. South Williamson benefits from it. The problem is that they don't have the tax base put into place to support the facility. They don't have an occupational tax. They don't have a restaurant tax. Now, Elkhorn does, but they don't have enough businesses there to support it. But you've got the Coal Run, which has been in the news quite a bit, and I'm not trying to make it a Pikeville Coal Run issue, but the mayor's quoted and the commission's belief is if it's a regional facility, then everybody should be sharing in this thing. But if it's not, then you can't put the burden of that just upon the taxpayers, the people that work and live in just the city of Pikeville. The commission sometimes gets criticized over that fact that, well, you've got more money. It's because that the people of Pikeville's paying the tax base. You've got a neighboring city, Homer, that doesn't have a restaurant tax now. So an unfair competitive advantage to a restaurant owner, that I've got a restaurant here that's got a 1.5% tax now, and you've got a restaurant within a mile down the road that doesn't have that tax base. 1.5% is enough. 3% is too much. So if you've got another community that's able to benefit from all the services, but not having to participate in it, then it's not fair. So what the city said is well, we'll look at a regional tax then. That's why the hotel tax was so important. That's why the restaurant tax was so important, to say, okay, we'll keep it low enough to where it doesn't impact the businesses, but we'll also utilize the hotel tax, which benefits from the Expo Center. So it's a regional tax, and those dollars need to be reinvested back in the community. If you look at any business owners, you put the spreadsheets together and say, this is Kentucky, and I'm not talking about gambling as a whole, but if you were betting on a horse because this is Kentucky, and you're putting your money on a sure thing versus something, a to-come bet, a possibility long shot, where are you going to put your money for your best return time after time after time? The Expo Center has a proven track record. I'm not saying Tourism Commission doesn't, but again, I use the example of the event in Elkhorn City, which is a great event. I enjoyed it thoroughly. We support it. I met with Stephanie Richards and said, the other day on the theater in Elkhorn City, and said, Stephanie, we need to work together. If you look at the Expo Center right now, Homer, we're getting ready to invest about $50,000 creating a new stage out front with a cafe. The intent of that is to promote free entertainment downtown, to bring people into downtown so these businesses prosper. We're investing in our community with all these things that I mentioned earlier, but we're building a stage out there now. We just spent $30,000 on new cafe tables. We're going to put lighting out front.
I assume you guys will be paying a restaurant tax if it passes. Your cafe.
And that's a good point. The intent is there has been some misdirection on that. We are not going to open a cafe. There is businesses downtown. There is the Main Street Cafe, the new where Champs used to be is opening. You've got Joyce's Place. You've got 5 Star. I challenge you to walk into the city park at any time during lunch. We put $2 million, as I said, into the city park for the renovations. Almost every county school brings their kids to the park during the end of the year for them to enjoy the city park. Almost every county school system and the city school system uses the Expo Center for their proms. These facilities are being utilized, again, not by just the city. But these businesses, if you go into the city park at lunchtime, I guarantee you today at 12 o'clock, go to the city park, every picnic table is taken up from people going to Long John Silver's or Pizza Hut or McDonald's or Jerry's or 5 Star. We want the same thing to occur during lunch hour down in the cafe. People can go to the downtown restaurants or outside skirts, bring it down there and enjoy somebody out there playing a banjo or a violin. But more importantly, we want to create weekend events. When we do Muscle on Main, we want to have local bands out there being showcased. The Artisan Center group that was in existence a couple of years ago kind of fell by the wayside because they didn't have funding, they didn't have a venue. They are now reforming. We have gave them staffing. Samantha Rogers, who is my assistant, is also now the Artisan Center director. So we've given the Artisan Center staffing so that the Artisan Center can reestablish themselves and they're looking at bringing our new artists downtown for Friday, Saturday evening events onto the Expo Center Plaza at no cost to the public. It's about creating an economy. It's about working together. And that's my point, Homer, is that this isn't about them versus us. It's about different ideals. But ultimately, these are still my friends. The commission was forced with a business decision of either let the thing close, the facility close, or to take this action. We hope that they come around to see. You're going to hear probably over the next little bit some argument about principle and law, what the KRS says. We talked to the authorities, the Kentucky League of Cities, on municipal law. They've written a position letter saying that the city is within the rights of doing everything that they're doing. The Tourism Commission, I'm somewhat disappointed today to read that the Tourism Commission is asking the fiscal court to enter into this on their behalf. You know, the fiscal court, this isn't a fight with the fiscal court. You know, again, these magistrates, a lot of them
You're
are.
talking at the county
Yeah, at the
level?
county level. What they're asking is they're asking the fiscal court to ask the court systems if the city can legally pull the funding away. The KLC, if you read the statute, I challenge anybody to read the statute yourself. There was an AG opinion, an Attorney General's opinion back in 1982. The question was asked, can this county withdraw from a joint tourism commission, is what it was asked. And actually the AG at that time was Brashear. Governor Brashear was the Attorney General at that time. And his comment is that there is no statutory provision that would allow a county to withdraw from a joint tourism commission. The difference is that it didn't ask if the city could withdraw. Under KRS 82082, there's something called home rule. And under home rule says is if there is no statutory provision that would prevent a city from doing something, the city has a right to do it. There's also under 820, I think it's 82092 or something right there, also says that if a city enacts an ordinance, it also can deactivate that ordinance.
I'm going to assume the city is not even close to considering that as an option at this point.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Listen, you've opened up a subject here that is much more complicated than we ever dreamed. You've put an urgency into it. You're telling us the Expo Center may implode at any moment.
Absolutely.
And it is contingent upon these two taxes, bed and restaurant, to continue operation. We're going to continue this discussion, but we're going to have to do it at a later date. I had 10 subjects to talk about, and we're through about a half of the first one.
Well, Homer, as you know, it's always a pleasure talking with you. You know, not only in the capacity that you're filling now, which we greatly appreciate, but the job that you do for East Kentucky Broadcasting. You bring a lot to the forefront. We appreciate I mean, it gives us a lot of power statewide to get our word out and to get let the general public know. I mean, we believe, as you know, in transparency, full transparency. There's never been a time that you haven't asked the city for a quote or discussion that we don't.
If you're not transparent, you're not anything. Donovan Blackburn.
Well, I appreciate that. And I realize there's a lot of things going on in the city, and that's a good thing. You know, I've been told when I first came out of the business sector and the public that if you're not making headlines and people aren't debating issues and things aren't happening, that's exactly right. So we're happy. You know, my phone this morning, you know, we started this discussion at 10 o'clock this morning. I came in at 8 o'clock, and I've had 5 phone calls this morning over this very issue, supporting the city's initiative, understanding the bigger picture. It is a long story. I appreciate your ear and listening.
Right. The issue's not over. We'll talk about it again.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, too.
All right. Thank you. Homer Owens speaking for Donovan Blackburn, City Manager of the City of Pikeville. And I'm with East Kentucky Broadcasting, and we'll make another day to be here on Pike TV.